This is audible cough.
I've been staying with people who have cats.
Just letting some people trickle in here. Okay, welcome everybody to our Indigenous Communities and Organizations session. We're really excited to hear from a variety of amazing speakers and then end the day with a thoughtful Woodland Style Florals and the Connection to Biodiversity, Land and Reclamation workshop led by Lucia Laford. With that, I'm happy to introduce your moderator for this session, Angeline, who is the Communications and Digital Media Intern here at the ISC. So she's one of the people behind our social media, newsletters, media scans, and graphic design work. So over to you, Angeline.
Thank you, Maddie, and welcome to this afternoon session. Before we begin, I'd like to highlight the Invasive Species Municipal Community of Practice. It provides a peer-to-peer space to encourage collaboration of those who work for municipalities, conservation authorities, and Indigenous communities involved in invasive species management at the local level. And you can sign up by visiting our website. Moving on to the session, as always, we encourage you to ask questions. Please type any questions you have in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Questions will be answered at the end of each presentation if time permits. Our first presentation is called Perceptions and Practices, Negotiating Relationships with Invasive Species on the Wiijindamaan Indigenous Land Restoration Project. And it is presented by Megan Sanderson from NRSI, Big Bear Paquette-Hardy from Rocky Bay First Nation at Conestoga College, and Terre Chartrand from White Owl Native Ancestry. Thank you for being here today and feel free to start whenever you're ready.
All right. Hi, my name is Megan Sanderson. I'm working for Natural Resource Solutions, Inc. And we are hired to, something happened.
We're still
Is everyone, can everyone hear us? Oh, something's happening.
Oh, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, we're just getting an alert happening. Okay, I'm gonna restart. Yeah, we're the Wiijindamaan team working on a piece of land in southern Kitchener. My name is Megan Sanderson. I'm of European descent, and I'm a biologist working with Natural Resource Solutions, Inc.
Hey, I'm Terre Chartrand. I am Métis and Algonquin. And I'm with White Owl Native Ancestry Association. I'm the executive director there.
All right, and hello, my name is Big Bear and I'm from Rocky Bay First Nations. As said earlier, I work on the land restoration project called Wiijindamaan and is through Conestoga as a student researcher.
Great. Dr. Stephen Svenson and Alissa G send their regrets, but we will now show you a video made by Alissa all about the Wiijindamaan project. Here.
Hi, everyone. We're not able to hear the video.
Oh,
Can we send the link? Would they be able to play it?
Sorry, I'll
That
cut in
is-
here for a quick second. If you stop sharing your screen and click again, there's a little button at the top or bottom left corner, and it says allow sound sharing. If you could just make sure that that's clicked off and reshare, we should be okay.
Okay, I clicked that, and so let's see. Sorry about that.
Wiijindamaan, the basic idea of that word is
That's working.
that we gather together. It's been expressed as we come together to remember, but it's also expressed as we come together to remember and to do something.
Ooh. Oh. Hello?
Yeah, we're good. Just reshare.
Sure.
Hello.
Hi. Sorry. Seem to be having technical difficulties.
Yeah, that's okay.
I think we should skip the video and just talk about Wiijindamaan from the heart. I believe that is not working for us right now, but that's totally fine.
Oh,
So this is the Wiijindamaan land. It's bound by the Grand River to this, and this just is a bird eye view of the land. It's in a deeply urban space, which a lot of people don't get until we actually bring them on the land. If you see the map on the right-hand side, that it is surrounded by suburbs. There's the wastewater treatment facility on the left, and then even south of the land is the highway. And this is an amazing urban Indigenous educational opportunity for youth, and we're looking to restore the land and make traditional knowledge more available to the public. Yeah, so now we will have Big Bear and Terre go over our work with several different invasive species found on the land, most notably giant hogweed, Phragmites, common buckthorn, and then we will discuss what we're doing in our meadow restoration garden.
so here we have a photo of one of the projects and workshops that that we ran over the summer. So to the left, you can see that we're working on remediating an area of Phragmites. So there's not a whole lot of Phragmites, but it's definitely a feature. And you can see it growing there. And so we're cutting it and we're trying to manage it. But on the right, you'll see that we've created, is that a part of the share that they're seeing?
I'm sorry, everyone. People aren't seeing the slideshow. They're only seeing the PowerPoint, and some are seeing black screens. So if
Okay,
you
there
could
we
put
go.
it on full screen.
Do you see it now?
I'm still seeing just the PowerPoint screen.
What about now?
No.
It looks totally normal to us, so this is frustrating. Okay. What about now?
Yes, there we go. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to just go back to the map just so to see it?
Is everything still not yet?
We have to share.
If you'd like, if you can email it to one of us, we could do it for you.
I'm so sorry, I have no idea.
It's okay. This is not your fault.
Yeah, this is very
No, this happens.
The opener is just not opening.
If you want to do this later, we have another speaker that can come on, and then we can figure out the technical issues, and then you'll be able to do your whole presentation.
Okay, that will be better. Sounds good. I will email you the.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, Angelina, you just gotta turn your unmute. There you go.
I thought I did. I guess I didn't. We now have Stephen Kell from Shawanaga First Nation. And his talk is about Shawanaga First Nations Invasive Species Task Force. Thank you for being here today, Stephen, and you can start when you're ready.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. 1 second here. Sorry about that. For some reason, I thought my talk was at 2:10, but
Yes, it is, but the other speakers were having technical difficulties, so we're going to do a little switch around if that's okay with you.
okay. Is it possible that is there anyone else, like one other presenter, to go before? I just need a couple minutes. I could just go and I just need to download the document from Google Drive down to my computer.
Okay.
Yeah.
If it'll take just a few seconds or a minute or two, you can still go.
Okay.
Or we do have another speaker that's here now if you wanted him to come on.
That would be perfect if that could be possible. Please and thank you.
Okay, we'll do that then.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, so next, we have Chris Herc, and the next presentation will be invasive species monitoring and management in Treaty Number 3. And Chris Herc is from Grand Council Treaty Number 3. Thank you for being here today, Chris. And you can start anytime you're ready.
Okay, I'm officially here, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right. Yeah, just give me a second. I'm gonna share my screen. Get started. All right, everyone can see the PowerPoint working good?
Yes, it's working. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, so thanks for having me, everyone. I just had to rush over here and literally just joined in about 45 seconds ago. I was helping lead a community engagement session up here for some lands updates and mining updates, but now ready to talk about invasive species with everyone here. So my name's Chris Herc. I'm the environmental manager here at Grand Council Treaty 3, and I started doing community-based water monitoring with communities 6 years ago, and we've expanded to many things since. And one of those, based on community input and feedback, has been invasive species. So excited to share everything that we've been doing for the past couple of years and what it's culminated to now. So I guess just kind of just a basic introduction here. If you're unfamiliar with Treaty 3, mostly located up in very northwestern Ontario. You can see it's just west of Thunder Bay, goes far north and a little bit into Manitoba as well, and borders along Minnesota. So Grand Council Treaty 3 is the traditional government of the Anishinaabe Nation here in Treaty 3, and our overall mandate and goals are to protect, preserve, and enhance treaty and Aboriginal rights, and that's through a number of different ways. My department itself in Grand Council is the Territorial Planning Unit. You might see it abbreviated on here as TPU, and we're guided by Anishinaabe Anakanagewin, and specifically Manitou Aki Anakanagewin, which translates to the Great Earth Law. And yeah, we have a number of areas of focus, whether it's promoting those treaty rights, Treaty 3 impact assessments, climate change adaptation related work, or environmental monitoring. And I guess we'll get a little more into the invasive species side of it. So I had left this slide up as a background for aquatic invasive species in Treaty 3, but really it's kind of expanded beyond aquatic invasive species, and hopefully we'll be further expanding in the future. But initial community interest was heavily on the aquatic side. If you're familiar with Northwestern Ontario at all, thousands of lakes, small stream river systems here, and that Winnipeg River Basin, that watershed, very closely lines up with the Treaty 3 territory. So there's a huge interest in aquatic invasive species here. And when you look at, what we're surrounded by, Manitoba on the left, Thunder Bay and the rest of Eastern Ontario on the right-hand side, and Minnesota down below us, there's a lot of different pathways forwards into Treaty 3, whether it's for aquatic invasive species or terrestrial based. And given the area, Treaty 3 is a huge tourist area, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people coming in, bringing boats from all over the place for recreation, fishing, and anything else. So a lot of different ways of invasive species being introduced here. And just kind of quickly, I'm sure people have seen lots of pictures and talks about these over the last day and farther into the week, but some of the big things on people's mind here in terms of aquatics, or close to aquatics, is spiny water flea, rusty crayfish, purple loosestrife, invasive phragmites, flowering rush is a big one that's coming up. Could have big impacts on wild rice populations for the Treaty 3 communities here, and zebra mussel. And like I said, a lot of our invasive species work has kind of just started in the last couple of years based on community interest. And so one of those interest points that was always brought up was zebra mussels in Treaty 3 territory. Very brief history lesson. Shoal Lake, which is in Treaty 3, is where Winnipeg, which is just a couple hours drive away, gets its drinking water from. So a few years ago, I think it was in 2019, there was positive presence for zebra mussel veligers found there. Down in Southern Lake of the Woods on the Minnesota side, the government there has been confirming positive presence of zebra mussel veligers. And on the Rainy Lake side, again, Southern Treaty 3, but also extends into Minnesota. On the Minnesota side, lots of presence for zebra mussel veligers in the water. And if you're unfamiliar when I'm saying veligers, it's basically just the tiny microscopic free-floating baby form of zebra mussels before they grow into an adult. So based on that history and the community interest, working with the Invasive Species Center, we a few years ago had a micro grant for $1,000 that let us build these zebra mussel settlement samplers to put out in communities. Didn't get any. We had lots of stuff growing on it, but we didn't have any zebra mussels growing on it. I'll put it that way. And so we kind of thought there was a lot of room to expand the monitoring for presence of zebra mussel in Treaty 3. Treaty 3 itself is 55,000 square miles in size. And just to kind of give that a better frame of reference, it's about twice the size of New Brunswick. So, we have the Territorial Planning Unit, and at that time in 2020 or whatever it was, just myself trying to do zebra mussels presence testing across 55,000 square miles in participating communities. So we were able to pull in more funding to start up water sample testing for zebra mussel veliger presence. We got a comically sized large net that was a little difficult to use off of docks, but it was the correct specifications wise for actually collecting those samples. And we got out to a couple communities and a few high traffic boat launch areas around Kenora just to do some initial testing. And we worked with ALS Labs Environmental for those tests, and everything came back negative. But kind of our main thought is that was just around the Treaty 3 area, or the Kenora area in Treaty 3. So very, very small sample and coverage area there. And there was a lot more room to expand to further monitoring. And just to give you some ideas of, what we were doing for field work, that was our net. Due to the net size, we got a wild amount of algae in those sample bottles. So going to 2023, we got a more appropriate size net. We adapted sampling protocols from what MNRF uses for their zebra mussel testing on Lake of the Woods. And we were able to get to 73 unique locations across Treaty 3. Important to note, it was the Invasive Species Center and their Action Fund that kind of helped make this all possible. So we got out to 27 Treaty 3 communities. We have 28 within Treaty 3. So we got to 27 communities and did some testing, sample collection for testing off of their main boat launch and dock areas, but also got out to 46 public high traffic boat launch and dock areas across Treaty 3. So good to know. Almost all of those samples did come back negative for Belaguer presence, but we did have one confirmed positive in Rainy Lake. So a little interesting there. Prior to this, the only positive samples for Belaguer presence was in southern Minnesota side of Rainy Lake, but probably due to just lack of testing there, nothing was ever found on the Canadian side. So we're happy to be the first organization to do that here on Rainy Lake in Treaty 3. And so we've been in contact with surrounding First Nations just to let them know what that means. The density of that Belaguer presence was low, so less than 10 Belagers. And just kind of educating and informing the nearby First Nations and what steps forward could look like in terms of management and future testing if needed. So on top of all that, Invasive Species Center was processing these results for us and was also able to test for presence of spiny water flea. So 8 locations tested positive for that, which I think we knew spiny water flea was here across Treaty 3, but I think it shows it's in relatively low density, as it only showed up in 73 locations, or it showed up in 8 out of 73 locations. And just from some internal increase in staff capacity, we were able to also get out and work with some local youth groups, teaching them how to do some zebra mussel monitoring as well, as you can see in that picture. So just to kind of give it a little more insight into where that was found, that zebra mussel presence, just in that little red box, that's Rainy Lake. A lot of the lakes here in Treaty 3 are broken up by many different islands. So, they don't look like one massive blob of water, but that is Rainy Lake, extends all the way down to Fort Francis and down into Minnesota. And so it is possible, Belaguer drifted there as well, but given how much it would have to drift around those water channels and islands, it's, looking like it was more introduced off of the public dock in the area. All right, I want to also quickly touch on Phragmites. I know there's a lot of talk on Phragmites yesterday, but through ISC, we were able to start doing some testing last year in the Kenora area, which all came back negative. We were mapping out digitally Phragmites growing stand locations, but also had a little bit of DNA testing as well. I think on about 10 different growing stands. One thing we did notice, and this is something that was mentioned, I think, in the talk from the Thunder Bay Conservation Authority, was there's almost a bit of blending in physical characteristics of Phragmites up here, whether it's native or invasive. And so we budgeted for a lot more DNA testing, and going into 2023, we're able to do 61 tests farther around Treaty 3. So a lot along the main kind of roadways and municipality areas outside of Kenora. So 17 of those did come back positive for Invasive Phragmites, no hybrids were found. That was also part of the DNA tests. And so we had 6 in just the Fort Frances municipality, a few in Dryden, 1 north of Vermilion Bay, and 1 above Uppsala, Ontario, which is more towards Thunder Bay. So just to kind of visualize it on a map there, all those green dots are the negative, basically the native Phragmites variety is the green dots. This map so far zoomed out just because of how big Treaty 3 is that it might look like one green dot, but likely a cluster of samples taken there. So down in the south part, you can see right in International Falls, Fort Frances area, where that border crossing is, 6 positive confirmed cases. And then on that highway heading east towards Thunder Bay, kind of sporadic invasives found through the DNA testing. So what that says to me is, Minnesota and Thunder Bay, I know a lot of people say sharing is caring, but maybe not so in this case, acting as a bit of vector pathways of Phragmites spread into Treaty 3 territory. And so important to note, I think invasives is also found in Manitoba, but fortunately no invasive Phragmites found out towards the Manitoba side of Treaty 3 and around the border area as well, going into Ontario. So next step forwards there is working with municipalities, government organizations, and maybe some local NGOs. I don't think chemical treatment of Phragmites has ever taken place in Treaty 3. It might be fact checked on that one, but I'm not sure whose jurisdiction it would fall under for some of these places. So those are going to be some conversations moving forwards. And we also were digitally mapping. So I know a lot of groups out there are using iNaturalist or EdMaps. So we used iNaturalist. It's just an easy way to log Phragmites sightings, invasive or not, in Treaty 3. And so we did work a little bit further to get a specific shapefile under iNaturalist to really highlight and keep track of what's specifically found in Treaty 3 and started our own project for it. So 179 observations there, very large majority of them coming from these past 2 years of GCT3 staff monitoring. Last kind of main small thing to touch on here is, as we've been doing our work across Treaty 3, we saw a lot of purple loosestrife on the sides of the roads. So again, through the ISC Action Fund, just a little bit of funding for some travel to send our summer students and myself along the roadways across Treaty 3, just to get some insight into where purple loosestrife has been spreading. And it's all over the place, like everywhere else in Canada. And important to know, a lot of these I wouldn't really call problematic areas yet, could easily be physically removed. On average, I'd say each, growing location somewhere between 1 to 50, 60 plants growing, but a couple problematic areas identified as well, that had, probably somewhere between 2,000 to 5,000 plus plants. So what we're hoping to do with this is use any kind of mapping data to keep track of the spread. Are these growing areas getting thicker, more dense over time, and looking at removal efforts, whether it's physical removal through staff and community efforts, or biocontrol methods through purple loosestrife beetles. And just again, highlighting the spread across Treaty 3. So again, you can see it's mostly tied to where we're able to go on roadways for the mapping. And just a couple pictures from the field.
Hi, Chris. We're coming up to question time soon. So if you want to wrap it up, thank you.
That is great. It tells me my internal clock is working because this is my last slide. Upcoming work and future plans. A lot of good stuff coming forward over the next couple project years. More funding to continue zebra mussel presence monitoring across the territory. Going to put a little more focus into Rainy Lake and some other community identified areas. We're going to be purchasing mobile bow cleaning stations to put across Treaty 3. That's going to be happening over the next 3 years. So we're not launching a whole fleet all at once, but taking it step by step. I actually have a call scheduled in half an hour for this one, but we're going to be creating an invasive species guidebook exclusive to Treaty 3. So again, just species only found in Treaty 3, so there's no confusion. We can have community members, take some kind of training or capacity building on it. Just at that meeting I was at earlier, a lot of interest having those sent out to communities so they can go out and start mapping invasive species on their own. And we're going to make it dual language, having it English and Anishinaabe-Moan. Something to move forward on here too is creating invasive species working groups for Treaty 3, with GCT3, NGOs, government staff, communities involved, and just kind of some future plans there of expanding scope and range of invasive species presence monitoring. That could be a number of different things, like looking at rusty crayfish presence in isolated lakes rather than just the big ones. Flowering rush presence, as that's going to have a huge impact on wild rice as it spreads. And as always, hoping to move towards better policy for invasive species management and regulation in Treaty 3. So I don't know how much I burned into question time there, but yeah, if anyone has any, I guess I can answer some quickly, or please feel free to reach out and call or send me an email.
I do have a couple of questions. We'll see if we have time to answer both of them. The first one is, hi, Chris, great talk. How big is your team and how do you prioritize your management work over such a big territory?
It's a good question. So when we first started, it was just me, but through slow kind of expansion of projects, not just related to invasive, we've been able to pull in 2 full-time positions for monitoring coordinators, hoping to add a 3rd to the team here soon. And also in the summer students ranging from 2 to 3, possibly 4. It all depends on the level of interest there. But how do we prioritize it? A lot of it's based on community input. We have 28 First Nations here in Treaty 3. I'm not hired to, be here and tell communities what the priorities are, where they need to focus their priorities. I'm here to listen to where their interest lies. And, if I'm being told zebra mussel is a priority for us and we'd like it to have happen, on Rainy Lake, the testing, Lake of the Woods, always happy to follow their direction. But if not, I can get back to communities on where I think, efforts might be better placed in the meantime till I get more from them.
Okay, thank you. We have time for another short question. You must have a great buy-in for this work in your communities. How do you communicate with leadership and the greater community, as it is obviously working well?
Yeah, so we just kind of with the size and scope of Treaty 3, we hold regular lands managers meetings throughout the year, where that's community lands and resources staff, whether it's a lands manager, mineral development advisor, or consultation coordinator, whatever the position title is. Chief and councils also attend those. We also work through some of our other programs, whether it's water monitoring or species at risk, to hold individual community engagement sessions, and invasive species is always something we talk about there. And we've also started hosting an annual national environmental gathering. So again, highlighting work being done across Treaty 3, not just from a Grand Council perspective, but communities as well. And so that's actually happening next week for us. So we'll be talking about it there. And then on top of that, we've just hired a communications coordinator. So our social media presence is being greatly expanded, and hopefully, we can do it better that way too.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. I'd like to direct you to the chat. Some people have other questions if you'd like to answer them in there. And we've also shared Chris's email too, if you want to get a hold of them. We're going to move on to our next presenters. It's the group that was here first. They're going to continue with their presentation.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I'll just read through the chat questions then.
Okay. Thank
everyone.
You so much. And next we have the Wiijindamaan Research Group continuing their talk from earlier this afternoon.
I just want to scream profanities.
Hi, everybody. So sorry about the technical difficulties on our end, but we would love to continue our presentation about the lovely Wiijindamaan project and sharing with you everything that we've learned so far. So we're just going to get started right away. Lauren, if you can go to the video that I sent you, and please watch this video that our coworker Alissa G made up that describes everything going on at the Wiijindamaan project.
Wiijindamaan, the basic idea of that word is that we gather together. It's been expressed as we come together to remember, but it's also expressed as we come together to remember and to do something together. And this is a project which we've been working on actually for a couple of years now. There's a few of us that have been working on trying to access this land in partnership with the City of Kitchener and also in partnership with Conestoga College in order to create a place of learning for Indigenous people around what it means to be involved in land-based work.
So anytime I see projects like this on large pieces of land, I always remember that it's really not land that was given to us in any way except for by the Creator. It goes beyond, I guess, an educational ecological project. It's more of a relationship with the earth and our mother, and the respect that everything is that's on here, you know, we need to be very, very clear about.
Land-based learning is like gaining the understanding yourself of like to live synergistically with the land and with the animals. It's not connectivity, the interconnectivity of everything and understanding it further. It's a gift to be out here on the land.
Called this land Wiijindamaan with the idea that this would be in some ways a classroom for us as Indigenous people, but also for students at Conestoga to be involved with in a number of different ways. One was growing food, some agricultural practices. Another part of this was doing restoration work.
I think that the land management is something that we can all learn from Indigenous practices. I think that environmental stewardship and making sure that lands are preserved and utilized, especially if it's like for food and medicine production, I think that that's just a really great thing.
And land-based education has the idea that the land teaches us. So when we do land-based education, it's facilitated maybe by teachers or human connection in some way. An elder facilitates the land to teach us. But it's that awareness that the land has the ability to pass on knowledge and to inform us of how we should live our lives in a good way when we're in relationship, proper relationship with the land.
What we do by bringing students is to allow them to open up that thought of the land is important.
I'm ecstatic, I'm overjoyed because this is stuff I didn't get to grow up with, and these are teachings I didn't get as a kid. So to be able to, you know, learn it now while I still can has just been, yeah, it's like my dream.
I think this is a really good thing to bring students in to get on the land. That's really, really important, is to bring people onto the land. You know, like people who are raised in a city don't get a chance to get out on the land, don't understand it, no one to teach them. This is, to me, is a really, really good thing.
With the way the climate is changing, the rising costs of food, housing, it's now more important than ever that we have people coming out on the land and being able to learn from it and being able to study it, because it is lost knowledge that we need to get back.
Climate change, regardless. That's over there happening, and it's happening, right? Regardless, but you're going to watch your environment and you're going to know if it's affected because you're observing it, right? And you're watching it. And that's what I think is important too, is that continuous visiting. People say, oh, love Mother Earth, and yet they never go and visit her, right? You know, how do you, like with the kids, how do you teach kids to love Mother Earth unless that you take them to visit her? Right?
My dad used to say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And so when Europeans came here, we had a perfectly running environment. They tried to fix it. We're still trying to fix it.
Right now, Western science almost has a huge leg up, especially in terms of, you know, what is valued as knowledge, what is seen as knowledge. So I do think that there's also an opportunity for Western science to take a bit of a back seat and to be guided and to not only listen to and to hear what Indigenous sciences and Indigenous knowledges are saying, but to prioritize those knowledges as essential for the well-being of the land.
Non-Indigenous people are invited by the land to come and learn. The big thing for non-Indigenous people is to understand that they're invited in. It's not their land. The land is not owned, and often in non-Indigenous or Western concepts, land is seen as something that's owned or belongs to somebody or is controlled by somebody. And that's not really our way of working with the land.
As someone with settler heritage, but as someone who actively studies this land, so-called Canada, I think this is integral to my research of the land, that I understand whose land it is, what are the original teachings, and also know where my place is in society and what kind of privilege I bring into any setting, and but also what help I can bring, and knowing where I can help and what I can bring to the table.
Before we can even reconcile ourselves to each other, we need to reconcile ourselves to the land. And so I think when we talk about reconciliation, there's ideas of land back and whatever's happening to restore land back to Indigenous communities. But any kind of involvement in reconciliation of relationship starts with our relationship with the land and then moves up from there.
I think that it's really important that Indigenous youth are making those reconnections back to the land, because we have become so disconnected and far removed from our cultural teachings and the land, especially in an urban setting. We kind of take for granted that Mother Earth is providing us with medicines and food, and I think that it's important as Indigenous people, and I think it's important as all people, that we go back and develop those relationships with the land and on the land.
So I think the land itself helps create the cooperation between people and that spirit of coming together, and that's what it's all about, right? But you're working to really improve something that you're hoping to, you know, it's never going to be the dream, but the dream is always there, right? And if you don't have dreams, then you don't have hope. So that's what's important for young people. Like, yeah, we could do this. Keep thinking every time you think of something to do, right? That's a dream or a hope, and that's a good thing.
All right, we can go to the next slide.
And working on actually for a couple of years.
Off, Dave.
All right, so we just want to emphasize that Wiijindamaan is in a deeply urban space bound by the Grand River to the south. And if you see in the photograph on the left, but also on the map on the right, it is surrounded by suburbs. There's a wastewater treatment facility on the left, and then below site to the south is the Highway 401. And this is a collaborative effort to bring back traditional knowledge in a very urban space and co-working with various Indigenous interest groups all throughout Kitchener-Waterloo area. So now we will have Big Bear and Terre go over our work with some notable species that we have found on site. giant hogweed, Phragmites, and common buckthorn, as well as talking about what we're doing in our meadow restoration garden. So next slide.
Before you go on, I believe we're almost at question period. So if you would like to wrap it up soon and leave room for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, let's just really quickly go through.
go ahead.
So I described this photo already, so can we get to the next one, please? Next slide,
Next
please.
slide, please.
Frag.
Could we get the next slide, please?
Our stuff might be frozen again.
There we go. Okay, really quick.
Did we skip buckthorn?
No, just do the, yeah.
I'm on the meadow restoration garden. Is that where we should be?
Go back to the giant hogweed, please.
Okay. Yep, we're there.
Start talking.
All right, so for giant hogweed, there's a lot tattered alongside the riversides, but something we have learned from Indigenous people collaborating with us is that the stems of giant hogweed can be processed to be edible. And there's another type of medicine that can be made with it, which we combine all other medicines, and it kind of just becomes a salve that you can use on your skin, but it also has to be processed in order to be able to apply to the skin.
All right, next slide, please.
I'm on meadow restoration garden.
Perfect.
Okay, so the meadow restoration garden, the one thing that we skipped over is buckthorn. And I'm just gonna quickly speak to that, if that's okay. Buckthorn, we're also using it to build lodges and things like this, and structures, as well as structures for doing tanning and other things. So we're trying to make use of the things that we're harvesting, even when they're invasive. So the meadow restoration garden, this is a wonderful little thing that we've planted in honor of one of our elders, Terre Brandt, who recently passed away. And so this garden was built with a variety of Indigenous species that all exist within that meadow space. This is a seed gathering garden for the public, but also to help with the remediation process. So we have a photograph of blue flag here. We've identified a lot of yellow iris, which is an invasive species on the Wiijindamaan land. And we're going to be growing things like blue flag amongst other species to mitigate against yellow iris. But the other thing, and sort of to speak to some of the issues that other people have brought up throughout this conference, is that we know that yellow iris is a bioremediating plant for heavy metals. So we're using these also as a feature to help with cleaning up this land. And Big Bear, you probably have just a couple things to say about that. So I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, so the yellow flag iris, we believe, has been there for a while because it's spread through a lot of the further back parts of the swampy area that we have control over. And we are hoping to move the blue flag iris into those spots and remove the yellow iris so that the blue flag can start spreading as opposed to the yellow iris.
And we're also using these plants that we're finding as things to study and look at as to why are they there to begin with. Mm-hmm. So where we have invasive species, what is missing that made for these plants to completely take over in these spaces? So like in the case of the area where we have a lot of yellow iris, we have like a deeply polluted spot. Mm-hmm. And so what are we missing there? And how are these yellow irises contributing also into this remediation? So we're kind of taking a long range approach and not just kind of reacting at the enormity of work of doing an urban remediation like this.
Yeah.
So
there's another, well, we covered Phragmites earlier, but it also appears in spots where there are large amounts of pollution. So we've noticed that it's really gathered in one area of the piece of land. And we figure that it has pretty decent amounts of pollutions of heavy metals and other types of chemicals that the Phragmites do also like.
Yeah, that they're bioremediating.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing, is removing those species. Then the other question is, what do we do with them, especially if they are bioremediators? So like there's just a lot more to think about than just purely removing these plants. There's also things that can be built and made with them. Phragmites is a great weaving material. You can make fish baskets for traditional fishing, and you can use it to thatch roofs. And we've kind of identified that every single one of these species has a purpose as well. So I think we'll just bring it around to a conclusion with this wonderful meadow restoration garden. So one of the things that we stand with is that everything here has a purpose. So whole stewardship must happen, because these all reduce diversity of Indigenous relations. We can do more than just destroy them. They can be harvested and put to use in the process of control. So we have a two-pronged kind of approach that we're mediating against invasive species, but also
Putting them to use.
Yeah. And then amplifying the Indigenous species as much as we can.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's great. We'll now be taking questions. Thank you very much.
Hi, nice, great presentation. We have no questions at the moment, but you've been good enough to be answering them in chat. So I think there are a lot of comments in the chat. If you'd like to conclude and just read the comments that you have in chat, and you can answer those there. And we'll just move on to the next speaker. Thank you so much. It was a great presentation.
Not really. We don't have a lot of hawkweed down here.
And moving on now, next up is Shawanaga First Nations Invasive Species Task Force with Stephen Kell from Shawanaga First Nation. Stephen, thank you for being here today, and you can start whenever you're ready.
Well, everyone, hopefully you can see that. Great presentation so far. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that video of the last presentation as well. So yeah, I'm Stephen Kell. I'm the biologist at Shawanaga, and then I'm also presenting partly on behalf of our habitat coordinator, Haley Smith, who does a big part in coordinating our invasive species project here at Shawanaga. So Shawanaga First Nation, we're on the coast of Eastern Georgian Bay. We have a very high diversity here, many of which is species at risk, really focused on species at risk reptiles and amphibians. And back in 2019, we sort of revamped our species at risk program to start doing these large sort of monitoring and community-based projects. And so those species at risk are really important to us, and we have a lot of ongoing projects with that, with reptiles, so turtles and snakes and frogs, as well as other species like bats, wolves, and most of these are Indigenous-led, very community-driven projects that are all established based on community concern. And so for this project specifically, we're really focusing on two main plants. I'm not going to go into too many details because I think we've all heard lots about these, but the two species in particular is Phragmites and then purple loosestrife. And so how this project sort of came to be, so our species at risk project has been going on for roughly 5 years now. Over these 5 years, we've started to notice an increase in invasive species, especially along the roadways. And when the project first started sort of 5 years ago, there really wasn't much, like there weren't many stands of Phragmites or purple loosestrife. It was in very low abundance. And then sort of over every year, we noticed sort of exponential growth, patches starting to move along the roadways, especially off from the main highway. And so we identified this need to start to have some sort of invasive control or management for the invasive species, especially now that it was starting to move into the land parcels of the First Nations off the main highway. And the main reasoning behind this was to have to ensure that we keep having healthy wetlands, ecosystems for those species at risk, the medicinal plants that are really important to us, and maintain that balance, and really try to get at controlling and managing these invasives before they start to get out of hand, which is good since we're still in that early stage. So here's a map of Shawanaga First Nation. So we have 3 land parcels, and they're sort of all spread out along the coast of Eastern Georgian Bay, interconnected by roads and waterways. So there's lots of avenues for both of these invasives to spread, especially on those roadways. And there's also a lot of construction going along the highway. And in the recent years, that has brought a lot of machinery and equipment that is contributing to that spread. And so for this project specifically, we're trying to tackle sort of the invasives in this area you can see along the map, and then slowly over time branch out from there. So our project was started, we're currently in the first year. We received funding from the Wetland Conservation Partner Program. We got 2 years of funding from that. So we have 1 more year to go. And then we received additional funding through the Invasive Species Center to add on to this. And sort of the going sort of title of our project is this Indigenous Invasive Species Task Force. So for Eastern Georgian Bay, there's been a lot of work with Phragmites done by Georgian Bay Forever, but a lot of that's focused more on the sort of aquatic bay patches, so patches that are out on Georgian Bay, and less so on the mainland. And so we wanted to create basically a group that would start to control these mainland patches. And this is just the sort of the working title that we came up with. But really having that sort of Indigenous focus, working with the partnering communities around us and up the coast here, and then trying to build capacity. So facilitating training with community members from Shawanaga, but also neighboring communities. So this spring we hosted a training session. We had Georgian Bay Forever there to help with that, but we had a whole bunch of neighboring communities and townships to all receive training to build that capacity. We wanted to be able to purchase equipment, so we've purchased multiple sets of equipment that we can lend out to neighboring First Nations or townships if they would like to go cut a patch of frag or control loosestrife or any of the other invasives that they might have. And then also sort of build that regional network of partners, and all together increase our knowledge and understanding of the spread and current abundance of those patches. So here's our main partners that we're working with right now: Georgian Bay Biosphere, Wissahickon First Nation, Moose Deer Point First Nation, Georgian Bay Forever, Township of Archipelago, and the Township of Carling, as well as Township of Seguin. So all sort of the major partners in our area, all working together to combat invasives. And so just our sort of project specifics, really to focus on Phragmites and purple loosestrife. There are other invasives, but we didn't want to take up take on too much in the first 2 years. And since these are easily to identify, especially along roadways, we thought it was the sort of a great two to start with. And so we just started with mapping all the roadways within 20 kilometers of Shawanaga. We're also working with some of the other sort of Ontario groups like NCC and data sharing, so that these can all the data can get shared and working together. We want to start to map the interior spread. So we are going to be flying interior wetlands with drone to try to understand how much the Phragmites and purple loosestrife is spreading from the roadways into our interior sites, especially areas that we know have a lot of species at risk. And then we're trying to cut and manage for these 2 years 10 sites, and these sites are sites that we've identified as some of the most important. So some of them are stands in significant areas. Others are sort of smaller stands that we know are manageable. We do have some stands that are just too big. And so we thought that it would be best to start with a lot manageable stands that we know that we can tackle in these couple of years. And then we're also working with multiple partners, so townships and First Nations. The techniques that we're doing is all manual. We're trying to focus on the cut to drown method, so cutting them below the water table to allow the Phragmites to sort of drown out the roots. A lot of our stands are sort of semi-aquatic and semi-terrestrial, which poses their own sort of challenges, especially doing this with all manual. We haven't really looked into any sort of chemical treatments yet. Our First Nation would like to try to do everything manual to start. So we did start back in 2022 with a couple of sites. And this was really to get our sort of feet wet, and then sort of stepped it up in 2023. So here's sort of the current state of the project. So we've mapped over 30 different sites in this area. We revisited the 3 previous sites, and those are looking really good now. We visited 7 newer sites, and then with the help of partners, visited another 13 sites. So we're up to about 20 sites visited over this year, and then we'll continue next year. Challenges to date has really just been these terrestrial sites. So trying to cut them down below ground, especially being on Canadian Shield in these rocky areas, trying to cut them below the surface has been a lot more time intensive and energy intensive than we thought going on originally. But we're going to tackle this as best we can into the future years. And then sort of next steps. So we have you can see the sort of the equipment in the back of the truck here. So we were actually able to get a vehicle plus gear that we're able to have this sort of loaner kit, as well as trained staff. So we were able to lend a hand to any neighboring communities, whether that's training, equipment, or like sort of staff and boots on the ground to help out. So we're increasing our partner network and hoping to do more partnered work next year, along with the other work that we're doing. And then just continuing to ensure that we're building that capacity, making sure that capacity remains within Shawanaga as well as the other communities and townships, so that even if the funding doesn't continue, that we still have all these resources and capacity to continue to manage into the future. And with that, I'll say miigwech. And if there are questions, especially specific questions, or you want to get in contact with us, I have Haley's email up here that you can contact, but I can also post both Haley's and myself's email and contact in the chat. and I'll take any questions if there are any questions.
Okay, I do have a question. If anyone has a question, can you please put it in the Q&A and not the chat? Thank you. I do have a question here. Are you coordinating your work with work along the Scarivore Community Road? A patch of frag showed up at one of the culvert crossings during construction a few years ago and doesn't look like it has been addressed.
Yeah, that's actually one of the photos in the presentations was that that patch along Scarivore community. So that patch is cut, and we'll be revisiting it for the third time next year.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question. How to cut terrestrial phragmites below the surface? So how do you cut?
Yeah, it can be really tough. The method that we try to go with is to take, so we have like spades or shovels. We're trying to get down below the surface, and then you try to use that shovel to sort of slice the root or the stalk. And yeah, you're trying to do it below the surface. So it can be really tough depending on the level of rock in the soil or where it's specifically placed. But yeah, trying to cut that stalker right below the surface as deep as possible.
Okay, and I have another question. With the plant material left behind, do you use it for anything?
We currently haven't been using it, but we would like, if there are those that know how to use it, we would really like to collect that information and have someone share that information with us. We just currently haven't been doing that. We're trying to sort of slowly build the project up. So if there are those that know good uses of it and how to use that, I would love for those to reach out to us to share that with us.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know if this has been addressed yet. Have you found phragmites showing up away from roads by power lines?
I can't think of any specific examples, but I have seen it. Yeah, haven't seen specific examples with the power lines. We haven't spent as much time looking down there versus on the roadways, but I have no doubt that it has been going down the power lines and from the power lines getting into interior spots that haven't been surveyed. So that's part of our goal next year, is to try to survey a bit deeper with drone and aerial mapping to try to see how far is it actually going and where it's going. But we have found quite a few remote patches that almost seems like how could it have got there, but there's almost always some sort of ATV trail or like a small trail of some kind, even like a water source where seeds or roots could have floated down from a neighboring trail. So it can spread interior very quickly.
Okay, and I have another question. From the Wiijindamaan research group. Would blocking sunlight from the frag after cutting also be a viable option?
Yes, that's actually a very good point. For those terrestrial patches, we have started putting like big heavy duty block tarps over them. When we're trying to use that spade to cut it below the surface, we do our best to cut it below the surface, but we just can't guarantee that we're going to be able to get every stalk. And so there is going to be a much higher level of regrowth versus in aquatic patches. And so we have been tarping certain patches, both like after cut, just to help it die, but also over the surface as well. But yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you for mentioning that.
Okay, thank you. That looks like all the questions we have. Thank you very much for joining us. If anyone has follow-up questions for Stephen, his email has been posted in chat. And thank you for joining us today and being a speaker today. It was really informative.
Awesome. Miigwech, everyone. Thank you.
And now for our last presentation of the day. It's a workshop with Lucia Laford. It's called Woodland Style Florals and the Connection to Biodiversity, Land and Reclamation. And make sure you have your paper, pencils, crayons, pencil crayons, markers ready. It's sure to be fun. Welcome, Lucia, and go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Ani bonjour, everybody. My name is Lucia Laford. I'm an Indigenous arts educator, woodland style painter, muralist, and I teach right now at the University of Algoma, the Art Gallery of Algoma, and as well as many high schools and elementary schools around the Algoma region. So today we're going to be doing florals. We're going to go through a few different things. I know we only have an hour, which is really exciting to get a lot of content in. But yeah, like Angeline said, really you can, I'm sure a lot of you have highlighters, pens, maybe some interesting Sharpies or gel pens. Really, whatever you have, you can absolutely use. So today we're going to be talking about florals. So here's just a quick example. The other thing too is that this presentation is going to have no slides. You're going to be just here with me, and we're going to trying to be face to face. So here's an example of a woodland style floral. This is a floral using spring flowers, and we're going to talk about the importance of those species and how we can get to our own version of creating a floral. But before we go further, I'm going to say Ani bojo kinaoea waskini koi nadishnakaz, bawating nadunjba, makwa dodem, anishnabe minwa Irish koi and dow. So it's really important to situate ourselves when we're speaking. So what I told you there is that my spirit name is Bringer of Light Woman or Lightning Woman. I'm from Sault Ste. Marie. I'm an Anishinaabe and Irish woman, and I am Bear Clan. So it's really important to acknowledge those facets of our identity. And like I said, if I was with you guys right now, I would ask you guys where you're from too. You can put it in the chat too, where you're from, what you do, anything like that, just to create that sense of connection. Being that I am Bear Clan, it is the Bear Moon. So one way that we can integrate our scientific knowledge and our cultural knowledge, and culture is a tough word anyways, because really it's more about our way of life as Indigenous people, but specifically as Anishinaabe people in this area of Turtle Island. And I'm sure you've heard of Turtle Island. And if not, it's what we call North America as Indigenous people. And we call Canada so-called Canada and the so-called United States of America. So right now in this territory, Bear Moon, I'm wearing specifically my bear medallion. A friend made this for me. It's a bear paw. And the reason we acknowledge that Bear Moon right now is because there's 13 moons in a year. And when you look at the back of a turtle, there's 13 plates, and then there's 28 small plates around. And so right now we're in the moon that honors that bear. And people ask, why are we in Bear Moon right now? And so as Anishinaabe, we think of the moons as understanding of what's happening in our environment. So there has been this gap through colonization, through systemic oppression and racism and all these ways of knowing that are Western, that has suppressed what we call scientific knowledge from Indigenous people. So Indigenous people, we have to and had to have had an understanding of our creation around us and the world around us. And so one of the ways that we do that is by acknowledging the moons that we're in. So Bear Moon is roughly around February, and that's when the bears are asleep. However, they wake up briefly and baby bears are born. And so some of you may have noticed the fog up above. Well, it wasn't really snowy, but the fog that rested a couple weeks ago and last week on the ground, if you were up late at night, you would have seen it for sure. And that fog, we say, is Mother Earth, Shkakmakwe, breathing life into those cubs and to creation. And so as Anishinaabe, we are keenly aware of the seasons, and not just in a scientific way, but in a way that encompasses all our ways of life. And so we are knowledge keepers that is circular, cyclical, and instead of a Western linear perspective, we're thinking about, okay, it's winter now, spring will come. And because of those seasons, because we are gifted and blessed with 4 seasons in this area, because of these 4 seasons, we have very specific, beautiful things that happen to this area. And I'll just say also that as Anishinaabe, we are the original caretakers of this land, and we have an obligation to protect the land and waters. And so that's how we're going to tie in Ojibwe florals with scientific knowledge, biodiversity, all these beautiful things. I just want to acknowledge first the Madisons that are here with me. So as an Indigenous arts educator, I don't just go around teaching, because as an educator, an Indigenous educator, it's really important to realize that when I'm smudging my ears and my mouth, because I want to be able to actively listen to what everybody has to say, and also with the understanding that everybody here and everybody that I teach to is a teacher, right? And I just have specific knowledge about this, and that way we're grounded in equality. So I have my abalone shell. I have my sage. This is white buffalo sage. I also have sage that is native to this area that was picked by someone from this area. It's in a bundle right now. And then I also have sweetgrass in a braid from this area. And I show you these medicines at the beginning and light that smudge so that way we can start things in a good way. And I know we're electronic right now, we're over Zoom, but when I'm smudging, even if you don't have smudge with you, I'm smudging for all of us so that we're in this space in a good way. And I smudge so that way I have good thoughts. I smudge so that way I see good things. I smudge so that way I say whatever it is I need to say. I smudge so I can listen, and I smudge my heart too, so that way I start in a good way. Okay. Florals. So get out your supplies, whatever that is for you. You need paper. Really, you can do this on like sticky notes if you have any, you like whatever paper, it doesn't really matter. This is more about the process and creation and learning together and enjoying after what I'm assuming is a long day and a long day yesterday of I'm sure amazing and awesome knowledge. But art also gives us that space to relax and to connect to the work that you do in a different way. So I have my sketchbook with me. I have all my markers, and we'll start off by thinking about florals. So for those that maybe aren't familiar with what an Ojibwe floral is, Anishinaabe people and Indigenous people across Turtle Island, we have had art and material culture for time immemorial. So again, time immemorial is not just we've been here for thousands of years or hundreds of years, but we've been here forever. So we have had material practices, meaning the objects that we create, the clothing that we wear, the tools that we use and that we create, all these things that we create, we can adorn them with decoration. And Western ways of knowing came here and declared some of it as art, some of it as primitive art. There's all these terms around it, and we're not going to get into that, although it is very interesting. But what I'm talking about here is these Ojibwe florals that we have been using and drawing and adorning our clothes with moose tufting, with beads, with seeds for time immemorial, meaning forever. So what these Ojibwe florals are a representation as we know that we are the original caretakers of this land, and we know that we are connected to all of creation. I'm lucky in the room that I'm in right now, I have windows facing out a huge garden, and understanding that when I say all of creation, I mean the plants, the animals, the dirt, the water, the earth, the clay here, all facets of life that are surrounding us. And so something else important to realize when we're talking about this is that instead of maybe in French, if some of you speak French, there is, female and male classifications of objects. In Anishinaabemowin, which is the language of the Anishinaabe people, we tend to classify things as inanimate or animate. So, having that spirit or not. So this chair that I'm sitting on would be inanimate, but, rocks, water, flowers, plants, the earth, the clay that I talked about, the bark, all these things are animate, and they have spirit within them. So these florals that we're going to be drawing those are animate, right? The flowers are a part of that creation. And there's so many different types of flowers that are native to this area. And as you guys are scientists, so this is pretty exciting, that I'm sure you know those species, especially those invasive species as well. And you know the bees and the bugs and all the creatures that help that ecosystem. So the biodiversity that we're talking about is that as Ojibwe people, we know that all those medicines, all those plants can be used as medicines in many different ways. And medicine doesn't just mean ingestible medicine. Medicine also means when we see a plant that has thorns on it, and maybe that would create harm if we ate it, we know that that medicine is, it has a different application. Maybe that plant protects the growth of another plant, and we can understand it in that way, that is medicinal. Maybe it's reminding us that we need to be strong while we protect others, right? So all the plants that we see are medicinal in that way. And when we are protecting our biodiversity here and the vast amount of species that we have here, we're also acknowledging that a lot of, as you guys know, a lot of the plants that we see and a lot of the plants that people love to have in their gardens are invasive species. And so part of my job as an artist and an activist and an educator is to talk about the native species to this land and to create Ojibwe florals with those species. So all that to say, today we're going to be talking about, well, I'm going to be talking about, I'm sure you guys have many more species in your head that you can think of, but I'm specifically going to be talking about, I'm going to talk about bloodroot, I'm going to talk about bellwort, I'm going to talk about wild strawberries, I'm going to talk about northern bog violets, leatherleafs, hepatica. There's so many different species. And so for me, when I am looking at a floral in real life, a flower in real life, and thinking about turning it into a floral, one important thing to know in woodland style art is that we're not worried about reality. So for those of you sitting there going, oh, I don't know how to draw, great, this will be even better for you, because we are not looking with our eyes. Instead, we're looking with our heart, we're looking with our feelings, we're looking inward and reflecting the outward creation around us. So try and turn off maybe the front part of your brain that's been active all day and just, try and enjoy yourself and reconnect with the process of just drawing or doodling. And so when I'm looking at a flower in real life, I am not trying to copy that flower the way it is or the way it's drawn, or the way it looks in real life. Instead, I'm taking kind of an approximation of how I feel and how that plant is looking to me at that moment. So this is my wild strawberry right there. Don't worry about the writing if it's backwards. It's really just me, my memory notes of, okay, that's a wild strawberry. This one down here, it's a violet. We can see, obviously, violets have more than, just what we're showing here, but this is the side view of a violet and how I've broken it down. And this hepatica, it doesn't really look like that, but to me, that's my approximation of this plant. And same with this bloodroot. I've kind of made the petals look like ties, almost like a tie that you might wear. So for florals, I'm just going to give you kind of a brief overview, and then we're going to do the process together. So for those of you that are really interested in those species and want to do this maybe further and take more time to do this, you can write down species. You can go out, maybe take a medicine walk, and what that would be is to look for those plants, find them, respect them, but we're not picking things, we're not taking them without giving back, maybe offering tobacco or offering a medicine in return for that plant. And so then looking at these plants, then you're drawing them into, a more simplistic form. And once you've drawn them and kind of decided, okay, I want my wild strawberry to look like this, I want my hepatica to look like this, that's when, as artists, you can start thinking about your composition. And so composition is how you place things on the page. And so these basic shapes right here are going to turn into flowers. So that's going to turn into a round flower. This is going to turn into maybe a bell-shaped flower like that bellwort, or maybe this is going to turn into, another flower kind of shaped like this. Maybe these will be my wild strawberries and this will be my violet down here. And so I've kind of played with a bunch of configurations and shapes. And in that way, I'm planning out how my space is going to look. So as an artist, we very rarely just start drawing and it turns out exactly the way we want it. First, we brainstorm, what kind of plants do I want? You know, I have an example here. This is more of a fall, late summer flower, but we have Indian tobacco, and how it, from these basic shapes of a circle and a triangle, when you start adding more detail, can start to look like a floral. And so for you guys, I would ask that when you pick out I would start with a pencil or a pen first, and I would maybe brainstorm whatever your process is. Okay, I want to draw some leaves, and I want to draw some bees, and then I want to think about summer flowers, and I really love, you know, cattails in the late summer, early fall, and I really love Herb Roberts, and I really love beach drops and all these things. You can Google plants too, and if you want to be able to see them. Now, the other way to draw florals as well is to just make up things, to think about flowers in general, and to just make things and let that flow out of you. So once you've kind of decided on that shape, that's when you start. And I'm going to go through this process with you. I'm just showing it first. That's when you can start. And this is where I can show you this page right here turns into this. So this drawing is actualized, and this one is just the beginning steps. So I've kind of broken up my page into halves. I've kind of added shapes that are going to turn into other flowers, right? So these are the same thing. They're just at different processes. And that's what we're going to be working on today. So for me, I'm going to get out my marker. Here's my page right here. And this is when I'm looking at a blank page. Maybe it can be nerve-wracking, but I don't think it has to be. And so we have the next half an hour to really just draw together and talk about some other exciting things. But when you're looking at a page like this, now there's also no set point when you have to be done. So you don't have to walk away today with a drawing that's completely finished. You can just enjoy the process, and then maybe at a later time you can paint it, or you can use watercolors or whatever else you want to do with your drawing. But today we're really focusing on that process of how your florals are going to look. So a few different ways, you know, maybe if I want to focus on hepaticas, I'm going to write this down, and I want to focus on blood root. And I want to focus on, is it appropriate for okay, also, I forgot to mention at the beginning, please ask questions. I want to create that space for me on my end where you can ask questions, not just about florals, but about other things as well. I teach from an academic perspective about decolonization and indigenization, and I understand that those can be very hard conversations to have. And so if you have a question about any of that, within reason, please feel free to ask. So, I'm writing a couple of species down there. I'm kind of doodling out, and you can follow along at this point. You can kind of doodle out what you might want your flowers to look like. And maybe you just find one flower that you really like, right? And when you're drawing out flowers, you can be as creative as you want, right? There can be big centers with, long, skinny petals. This maybe is starting to look more like a giant aster, and I can add in those petals, or I can start with shapes. So I can start with, oh, that's a really wonky circle. I'll draw a better circle. I'll look at it. Okay, so I can start with a circle, and then maybe I can portion it up and decide that I want that many petals, and then draw in my petals. I find that this method is really good for any perfectionists out there that don't really want to necessarily start drawing right away, but they want to really plan things out. So once I've kind of doodled some flowers, and really any flowers is possible, I'm not going to necessarily take you today through, this is what you're going to have to draw from this stage to this stage. I'd rather foster hopefully that creativity that you're feeling. And everybody's creative, especially I've been teaching for 7 years. And those people that say, oh, all I can draw are stick figures, those people have a lot in them. So if that's you right now, thinking all you can draw is stick figures, you have a lot to offer in the terms of what you can draw. And so this is when you can start playing with as well other different shapes. And that's why violets are really cool, because I'm going to start with a little tiny shape, and then I'm maybe going to draw these big petals like that. And now I have a more organic, interesting looking flower. And so in woodland style art, we think about perspective as well. So one teaching about the eagle is that the eagle flies so high above us, close to creator. And so when that eagle's flying high, they have a very different perspective than us here close to Mother Earth, right? So when we have different perspectives in woodland style art, and I have some examples for you as well, while you doodle your flowers. So keep doodling flowers, maybe think about where you want to put them. I'm just going to talk about a few different things. So like I said, that eagle has a different perspective, up much higher than us here, down on close to Shawanaga, Mother Earth. Woodland style art is all about thinking about the perspective that you see things. And so from a lot of time, you'll see stuff from the side perspective in woodland style arts. And I'll just show you two examples. So this is an example of a painting that I did just after my father had passed away. And so this is a really quick painting that I did just to get some emotion out. And there is me and my father is reaching up to the stars because he used to tell me about constellations and star teachings all the time. Then we're reaching across a lodge. So this is a space for teaching. And my dad was also an educator and really instilled in me the passion to teach and the gift to be able to teach our beautiful way of life. And so we're reaching across that teaching lodge that's grounded in Mother Earth. This would be the teaching portion where we sit and reside in. And then down below, there's flowers because my dad really loved flowers, as do I. And then we have our hair connecting. So again, this is not a picture of reality. It's a picture of two people and, you know, without bodies and their arms reaching longer than they actually are and reaching up to the stars, reaching up to the moon, our hair connecting. And the reason our hair connects is because my father is an ancestor now. And I think to him, you know, I think of him and our other ancestors that I have up there. And I think of the connection we have between our hair and the strength and resiliency that we share. So there's one perspective. Keep drawing your flowers, work on them for a few minutes, doodle a few different ideas out, maybe get your highlighters out. And before you even start coloring in, maybe just, you know, doodle some flowers in different colors and stuff like that. So that's an important process as an artist, just to doodle at first. Then I just wanted to show you this painting. This was recently in an exhibition, and this one is called the Wiijindamaan, which is the gift of dreaming. And so in it, we have two people seated in a lodge, and at the center is a tree, and the tree reaches up, and on this side, we have someone dreaming about the stars, again, our connection to ancestors and grandmother moon. And then we have a person performing ceremony on this side. And so they have their pipe, and then from the pipe is flowing all these animals, a sturgeon, a loon, a bear, a bird, and it's dreaming. And the stars, again, are below, connected to our roots and our ancestors. And so this piece was really about our connection to the dreams that we have. Okay, so now that you've drawn out a few stars, I'm going to give you the example stars. Now that you've drawn out a few flowers, I'm going to give you some examples of how composition might work. So this is when you're looking at a page, you have to think, well, do you want it this way? Do you want it this way? Whatever way, it's totally up to you. And that's when I can start drawing either shapes or lines first. So I'll split this page in two and show you two different examples. So on this side, maybe I start drawing in shapes first. So I don't necessarily know what flowers I want to have, but I know that I want, you know, maybe I want some berries over here, but I don't even know what types of berries. And I know I want some small flowers, and I know that I want, you know, a stem going down and reaching down, and then I want some leaves over here. So this one is asymmetrical. And then I want this connected up to this, right? And so now I'm starting to come, and this looks like nothing right now, but this is when you're doodling at this stage of, okay, where do I want things? And so this one I started drawing shapes first. And on the other side, this is where you can start drawing, if you want to try this way too, this is where you can start drawing lines. So maybe right now you're inspired by different shapes, like this, you know, and at the end of each of those lines, that's where I'm going to be putting a floral. So here, maybe I'd put a bramble of blueberries, and maybe over here I'd put a, you know, a branch of strawberries, and over here there's, well, you know what, there's nice space for another big flower right there. And maybe I have some leaves coming off here. But right now I'm just exploring those ideas. So I'm going to ask you to take a few minutes just to kind of doodle out those ideas, just to think about how am I going to connect my flowers. And the reason Ojibwe florals have this beautiful black line, it doesn't necessarily have to be black, but the reason we have this line that connects everything is that we are understanding more and more the way science has been understanding, but we have always understood this as Indigenous people, that all of life is connected. So in woodland style art, you saw in the two paintings that I showed you, and you saw in the examples of the florals as well, that everything is connected with that black line. Put this example up again. So everything, all these florals are connected with that black line. And that's that physical representation of connection. And so as Indigenous people, we believe not just in that physical connection, but also in spiritual connection, emotional connection, and mental connection. And so these flowers, if we believe in them as, you know, animate objects that have spirits, then we're connecting to them, not just in the physical way of, here, I'm going to plant this flower, I'm going to plant this seed, or flower, and I'm going to watch it grow physically. You know, I'm also connecting to it in an emotional way, you know, caring for it, caring for that life that I have, you know, planted in my garden. But spiritually, it's also that obligation to be with that object. You have made that agreement to care for it. And so just like I'll show you here, part of my education bundle is that I carry a drum with me. So I have my drum here. And again, this is an object that some people might say is an instrument, just like when you look at a flower, you might say that's just a flower. But our Indigenous perspective would be that I am the caretaker of these objects. I have entered into that obligation to spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally take care of these things. So I'm recognizing when I'm planting that I am spiritually connected. I am emotionally connected. I am mentally connected to that. It's taking up space in my brain in a good way. And then lastly, I'm physically connected to that plant as well. So that are those black lines that you see in woodland style art. And you guys are all familiar with woodland style art. You have seen it in and around not only Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma region, but it is across Turtle Island. It's a very popular form of art, not necessarily talked about, but visually popular. So you'll see it on magazines, you'll see it in magazines, you'll see it in representations. If you go to a lot of the buildings around town in the Sioux, you'll see woodland style art. But if you ask somebody, hey, what kind of art is that? They might not necessarily be able to tell you it's woodland style art. And I say it fast, but really it's woodland, WOODLAND, one word, woodland. And it's in reference to this style of art was created in the 1960s, but even though we're thinking of it as a contemporary art style started in the 1960s, it is foundational to our whole way of life in the pictographs, in material culture, in all these things. So really it's been around for time immemorial, meaning forever. Just this modern contemporary iteration of it is stemming from the 1960s. Maybe some of you have heard of Norval Morisot as well. And he is considered the grandfather of woodland style art. Okay, so now that you've been drawing your ideas out a little bit, this is where you can take your ideas, and I'm just going to show you with two different colored markers how this might look. But I'll show you in 1 second once I draw this version out. Okay. So I have drawn my root system out. This is my connection, and I'm going to fill this up with different flowers. And this is where I'm going to take a black marker, and I am going to take these shapes and I'm going to make them into flowers. And this is where having a pencil would be helpful, because generally we erase the guidelines that we're drawing with originally. So this kind of art that I'm showing you as well, you'll see if we have any beaders in the house with us. You can bead florals as well. So when you see regalia, which regalia is not just clothing worn by Indigenous people, regalia can be, if we're talking about spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, it can be that representation of who you are, and your regalia can be worn to ceremony, it can be worn to powwows, it can be worn to formal events, you know, weddings, graduations, funerals, all these different things. And so on regalia, you might see beaded florals. So right now we're drawing them, but you can also bead them. So I'll show you what I'm up to with the black marker so you can see the difference. But in this one, this is when I've started to add all my different shapes of flowers. Okay, and for those that are really interested in bugs or fish or birds or any animal really, if we take the premise that woodland style art is all about connection between things, this is when I'll talk about Christy Belcourt too for a second. Christy Belcourt is an amazing Métis artist who does Métis florals in a painting style. And when you look at her paintings, you'll see not only florals, you'll also see all the other ways of life added into. So you'll see bugs, you'll see worms, you'll see butterflies, you'll see all these different types of animals. So this is where, when I have a space like this, maybe I can add some bees. And I was very fortunate to go to the Invasive Species Center and to have an awesome tour. And they showed me the collection of the pinned bugs that you guys have. And it was pretty astounding to see that and to think about the possibilities of how viewing these bugs, you know, lends itself to art as well, or the creation of art or the process of art. And, you know, how you can imagine showing a classroom full of youth all these bugs and then having to draw them as well. So now we're not just connecting in a science way of, okay, here's what this bug is called, this, and this, but we're also connecting in an art way. You know, when you talk about the bugs and then their roles in creation, then we can talk about that in a spiritual way as well. So how these visual tools can really help us as educators as well. So this is, like I said, I like to go on tangents sometimes about the importance of this style, because really, maybe you didn't know you were signing up for this aspect of art and science, but really what's important about woodland style art is its application to all of life. And that includes what Westerners might say science is, and how I understand science is that connection to storytelling, that connection to how I exist in a space, that connection to the different applications to different, you know, bugs and animals and plants, and not just how they're useful to me or not just classifying them, but understanding holistically their place, just as I have a place as well. So I'm going to go along, I'm going to add a few more details. And those details can look like whatever you want. It would be really nice too at the end. We did this last year when I did this talk too, is that people turned on their cameras and showed me what they were working on. You don't have to, of course, it's totally up to you. But it can be really important to show what you're working on, and not just for gratification, but to be proud of what you're doing. So I'm going to go along. I'm going to add a few more details. You too add some details, and they can look like whatever you want. So the difference between showing somebody how to do it and letting people be creative with it is really important in Indigenous arts education. And that's a way to indigenize education, is to give space for those people wanting to try out new things. And especially if you feel, you're not great at art, this is the space where you can try and draw different things. And hopefully you're not judging yourself. Okay. So this is what mine is looking like as of yet. Okay, there's lots of negative space here. Negative space is space that is not filled by any object. Also, I'm checking time. So we have about, 15 minutes left, which is plenty of time. And so now, if I got to this stage, I would erase, if I had done this in pencil, I would erase the guidelines. Okay, so those beginner basic guide shapes, those circles, those triangles that I drew in, I would erase those and I would go over the flowers that I did draw, whether in marker or in highlighter or in pencil, or not pencil, or in pen, something more permanent. And that way you'll be left with a skeleton. And I'll show you an example of that. You would be left with something like this. And so when we zoom into this, we can see this. There is no pencil marks necessarily. This is just a black and white image of florals. And in this image, now I can just start coloring it in. So once you have an image that you're happy with, the goal is to color it in however you want. And when we see this image, I didn't start with this. Remember that I had my guide shapes. So you can see the circles, all the guides, the triangles, right? And then this is that next step where I'm really taking away those guidelines. And now I can see the connection between everything. So this is the piece that I talk about in fall. And so this one has goldenrods, it has Indian tobacco, it has asters, it has coneflowers, all different types of medicines. And it's really awesome when you walk around in the fall time and you can see that we're going into that winter season like we just did. Fall was not that long ago, especially this prolonged kind of fall, spring, when we haven't been having winter fully. Fall is that really beautiful time of year when things are dying and it's really beautiful. And so while you guys are working on sketching out some, we call this the bones or the skeleton of a floral, while you're working on drawing this out and coloring. So that's where you can have I know you guys as scientists have highlighters floating around, I'm sure, in many of your drawers and office spaces. I even have these nice highlighters too. And you can really start coloring in with that. So I'm just going to briefly talk while you guys work on your coloring about the medicine wheel, because that has been something that I've referred to a whole bunch of times, but I just want to show it just in case anybody is not overly familiar with it. This is one way the medicine wheel can look. Okay, what's important is that we have that white, black, red, and yellow. Different medicine wheels have different colors in different ways. And so what I mean by that is that when I look at this medicine wheel, each portion of the medicine wheel corresponds with different teachings. And so if you put all the teachings of Indigenous people together, it would be this medicine wheel, because it is a way of living holistically. And so we have north, east, south, west. We have winter, spring, summer, fall. We have the different medicines. We even have the different life stages, right? So we're talking about, being young, that baby, to the youth, to then an adult, and then to the winter of your life where you're an older person, an elder. And so the medicine wheel encompasses, like I said, all of those teachings. And so if we were to relate to the medicine wheel seasonally right now, we are in the white portion, the north portion of the medicine wheel. And so, and you guys are keenly aware of this as well, but I like to talk about, especially with youth too, and adults as well, is that when we're in that north, we're in that winter time. it's not just a time to have, have fun and or be cold and like lots of people like to complain about the winter time as well. It is this beautiful time that we have been gifted where Shkakamukwe, which is Mother Earth, is resting. So we have all these other seasons, and it would not be possible in this territory that we are to have those other seasons without having this time of rest. And so when we think of the snow, we think of a blanket covering Mother Earth for rest. We think of a blanket covering all our plant relations. We think of the blanket covering ourselves as well. And so when we have a year like this, and it doesn't, thank you for those that have to go. I mean, go whenever you have to go. It's all good to me. And so that blanket of snow that's covering, when we have a year that doesn't have that blanket of snow, there's different ramifications emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically, which are, again, all aspects along that medicine wheel. And the aspect that really, a lot of elders have been talking about in the ceremonies that I've attended in the last month are really worried about how our native species are going to do when they haven't had the blanket of snow to cover them and to cool the earth, and for them to be able to bloom in a way in spring and summer that will be good for them, right? And so elders have been talking about this. They've been talking about the sap running already in the maple trees. And so us as Indigenous people, this is maple country, but not in a Canadian way, not in a maple leaf go maple syrup way, but in a, hey, we have this relationship with these maple trees, and when the conditions are right, this sap runs, and then we turn it into syrup. And this maple syrup has been a foundational aspect of this time of year for Indigenous people in this area, because the maple tree doesn't grow everywhere, right? And so elders are really talking about sap running right now and what that means, and will it even taste good, and what does it mean? How do we tap a tree right now? Is it appropriate to tap a tree right now? And not just physically can you, because even if you can do something, we still have to think about whether we should do that. And so these conversations are happening in our community. And so winter is that time for us to think about these things, because we are not out in nature in the same way we are in the spring and the summertime. And so winter becomes also that way for us to tell stories. And so when we have an awesome conference like this for the Invasive Species Center, we also think about winter as a story time to tell stories. And that's when we gather with our family, our friends, our colleagues, our workers. We're inside, maybe around a fire. That would be nice. And we tell personal stories, we tell work stories, we gather, we reflect on things, and we take that time to rest as well. And so the reason we're specifically drawing florals in the winter is because we are thinking of that renewal that will happen in spring, and then the growth and the just being that happens in the summer. And then, of course, the completion of the cycle, the dying and the resting, the beginning, the stages of getting ready for rest in the fall, and then the death that occurs in the wintertime, when plants die, and how that's a needed and natural part of the cycle. But you guys all know that, so that's exciting. And so we draw these flowers in the winter to remind us of the good things that will come and the growth that will happen, but also the rest that is needed now. And so if you're thinking about rest, you can add snow around your florals. You can add a blanket of snow. You could draw, and when you start really getting into drawing florals or beading florals, you can think about the seeds and the bulbs and the roots, all the things below the ground, the Shkakamukwe, the earth that resides around us, and how those things are resting there. And so if you're extra tired in the wintertime, that's good. That's how it's supposed to be. And anyway, so there's many different ways to draw all these different florals. I see it's 3:25, and in keeping with time and the storytelling, I just want to look. I see there's a Q&A thing. Okay, because understanding that people have to go soon, so please go if you have to. So I'm going to see this question now. Last year I had conflicting emotions around the ethics in creating florals after your teachings, as while I feel connected to the land, I am a colonizer of this country. I felt saddened as I decided to put away what I worked on the workshop festival. Okay, so I guess the question is it really okay for us to create artwork influenced by this teaching? Absolutely. So I get this question a lot, and I teach a lot about the difference between appropriation, what it means to be settler, what it means to be a colonizer, what it means to all these different terms. And there's many terms that you're going to hear. And so, absolutely, me as an Indigenous artist, I'm coming into this space to indigenize the space. I can't decolonize the space because I don't hold the power in this space. I can indigenize, and indigenizing includes, so for those of you that are not familiar with the term indigenizing, it is the active act of It is the act of resurgency. It's living an Indigenous life, whatever that means to those Indigenous people. It is resiliency, right? In the face of oppression, it is resistance against oppression, creating those specific acts. And resistance can be, for an Indigenous person, it can be just waking up every day, or it can be going to a protest, or like for me, I'm kind of a passive activist in that I teach art in that way. And so when I'm indigenizing this space, I'm inviting others to indigenize yourself. So when we think about it, we are all treaty people. If you are living in Canada, you are a treaty person, whether you are settler, immigrant, colonizer, there's many different terms, Indigenous, all these things. We are all governed by these treaties if you're a Canadian. And even if you're not a Canadian and you're here visiting, or you're on treaty territory, and those treaties were signed between the Canadian government and Indigenous bodies. And so, long story short, when I'm coming in in a place of love and kinship. And how can I talk about florals and hope that you guys create them so that way it can foster that connection between you and the land. But if you're a settler, that's even if your family has been here for 500 years, even if your family has been here for 500 years, right? It's understanding that Indigenous people have connections that go beyond that and have been here for time immemorial. And so in this way, we can all connect to the land together. And so whatever that looks like for you, and florals, drawing florals is one way to connect to that land and to connect to, because to me, it's obvious that I think everybody should feel that connection. If you're going to live here, if you're going to work here, we should all feel that connection to land and to the people that have been the original caretakers of the land. So I would encourage you to draw florals. Now where the line is where you don't draw these florals, represent yourself as an Indigenous person, and then go sell them, right? Those are differing lines, right? But learning and sharing in an educational space, absolutely. Because I think it strengthens all of us as we move together towards reconciliation. So I want to thank you guys for drawing. If you would like to show me, if there's a way for people to turn on their cameras or to post a photo in the chat or to send to Angeline or Lauren and for the team at the Invasive Species Center their pictures of their florals that they drew, that would be great. I always love to see what people create. And then lastly, I wanted to leave you with 2 books that if you ever get the chance to read, kind of about what I've talked about. So we have Dancing on Our Turtle's Back by Leanne Simpson. Amazing perspectives and very interesting, and it'll make you think of introspection as well and your intersectionality. And then of course we have Braiding Sweetgrass. If you haven't had a chance to read this is a great book about the connection of Indigenous people and settlers and everybody between traditional knowledge, science, plants, all these amazing things. So those are 2 books. Chimigwich, everybody, for taking your time out and for staying here and drawing with me and hopefully seeing that connection between art and science. And with that, it's 3:29. So my name is Lucia Laford. Miigwech for being here with me today, and please send in any photos. And thanks for sharing this space with me.
Thank you so much, Lucia. That was an awesome workshop. I wish people could show their work. I'm not sure if they can, though. It doesn't seem like they can. And I would show my work, but I didn't quite finish it. I was listening to your talk mostly, but it was so great. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lucia. That was so wonderful. What a great way to end the day, Miigwech. I honestly looked forward to this workshop ever since the last forum when you joined us. We are asking, if anybody wants to send in pictures of their art, please do. We posted our email in the chat. We'd love to see them ourselves and to share with Lucia too. I can show you mine really. Oh, maybe it's my
Yes.
background. Oh, my background, it might mess it up.
No, I could. You could see it.
One second, I can take
was-
this background off really quick. Okay. It was so much fun to do. So yeah, everybody send in your pictures if you can and share. But yeah, you're such a great artist and teacher. So thank you so much for everything today. It was really great. I would like to say a really big thank you to all of our speakers throughout the entire day too for your valuable research, insights, and perspectives. If you did miss any of the sessions, session recordings will be available after the event on our YouTube channel, as long as we have speaker permissions. So please join us again tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time to learn all about oak wilt, forest invasives, policy updates, and more. So thank you so much again, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.